In this video, I'm going to talk about making sure you're using the right color mode in Illustrator and Photoshop. So if you're producing something that's going to be printed, you should be working in CMYK. So if you are creating a vector or you've downloaded one that you're going to take apart and edit and use, either is fine, but make sure that you end up in the right color mode. So Illustrator will tell you this right in the tab of your document. So I can see here this says CMYK, so I know that this is created to be printed and not really to be on a screen. So these logos are good to go if their output is to be printed, but if I want to make these ready to be put in RGB, which is anything that's going to be on a screen, web design, online graphics, ebooks, any of that stuff should be in RGB. So in the file mode, I can come down to document color mode and choose RGB. And we can see that the color mode of the tab has changed. The problem with these logos is that they have all of these swatches. So you notice that these swatches have the little corner thing, which means it's a global swatch, and this little dot, which means it's a spot color. So for our purposes on this project, we don't need to worry about these logos. However, if you're downloading artwork and you see these things popping up, especially if they say something like Pantone, these are going to be a big problem and should be replaced, because these can't just be kind of forced to RGB. They're always going to be stuck in CMYK. So a global swatch, and that's what gives this the white corner, is one that's kind of like an InDesign swatch. So anything that I make that color, like this box, if I go then and I double click this swatch and edit it, everything that uses that swatch is going to change. So I'll click preview and I'll move something. You can see everything on those is changing. So that's a global swatch, and they can be really useful to set up on purpose. By default, these swatches are not that way in Illustrator, whereas in InDesign, they are global swatches by default. The dot is a bit more particular. So a spot color is one that's specifically mixed. So if something goes to be printed, the reason it's called CMYK is actually most of that printing is done just with cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink, and it will go through a traditional press through 4 rollers, one for each color. A spot color is an additional roller. So these ones that say Pantone, some of these said Pantone. Pantone's a separate company that creates these specific color matched inks. So they would specify, I want this exact ink. Don't try to make it up. Give me this exact one. Brands do this all the time. All big brands have Pantone color matches. So if I double click that swatch, and I'll come over here so we can actually see it. So you can change it back to process color from spot color. And here's that global option if you're curious. And then you could push it to RGB if you need to. Most of the stuff that you download, if you're going to download something to take apart somewhere, they're probably not going to have spot colors. That would be very odd. But it's just something to keep a lookout for when you're doing different types of graphics for different outputs. So that's Illustrator. If you're doing something that needs to be only grayscale, and I'm just going to delete these 3 here for now, delete my colors. You'll notice that there isn't a set mode for it. It's just CMYK or RGB. But if you're doing something in grayscale, it's probably because it's going to be printed. So I'm going to switch back to CMYK. And then when I design something, I'm going to make sure that I'm only using black ink. So you can see here in this rollover that all the inks are at 100%. That's not what I want. this one, I can see the color mode is grayscale, and then it's only black ink. K means black ink. So this is what I want. If I'm going to be drawing my own shape, I need to look for a color that will work, or I can double click on this, and I see I've got colors here, so I would say 0, 0, 0, and then whatever number you want. That'll give me a gray. So Illustrator swatches should always have a black swatch in there. This one's a bit different because I started with this file of logos. So if you're doing only black and white, make sure that your document is in CMYK and all of the colors you're using are only having black ink. So they should all the CMYK colors should be 0, 0, 0, and then some other number. If you're doing something for print that's in color, make sure your document again is in CMYK, and make sure that all of your swatches are also in CMYK format, but avoid spot colors, the ones with the dot, because they're going to need special things when they go to print. And if you're designing for screen, make sure that your document is in RGB and that you're using RGB swatches. So if you start a new document in Illustrator, so if you're going to start some brand new artwork, you can choose this at the outset. So under Advanced Options, that's where you can choose RGB or CMYK. All right, so that's Illustrator.